third station, Ganbaremasu, the power of patience and perseverance. He bullet train we on which we're traveling so smoothly towards Kyoto. Tea almost flies over the rails. It is the fruit of thousands of hours of work by engineers who did not give up on a shared dream until they had fulfilled it. Perseverance is one of the values at the forefront of the Japanese mentality. In many Japanese comics and animated shows, the main character often reveals a childhood in which they demonstrate quite a few shortcomings rather than great abilities. But they have a purpose or objective in life, an Ikigai that makes them overcome obstacles and carry on. Through this personal horizon, you will gain wisdom and experience continual self-improvement until you become the hero you set out to be. It is far more realistic and achievable than a comic book scenario in which the hero's superpowers are innate, and the drive that moves them stems from anger or ambition or a desire for vengeance. Simple goals lead to great achievements. Another characteristic of Japanese heroes is that their objectives are straightforward, simple, and pure. They do not have great ambitions. A typical manga storyline has the leading character wanting to be a good sushi chef, or the best television presenter in his province, or a realtor. There is even a television series, Shinkansen Girl, about the life of the bullet train passenger service attendants, and how they always strive to improve the way they serve the customers. They are simple goals, which anyone can identify with, but persevering even in simple goals leads to achieving great personal milestones. Along with perseverance, patience is a value the Japanese exercise constantly. But this patience does not mean that they wait for things to happen, as if they are expecting some outside miracle to occur. Rather, they practice patience along with perseverance until they achieve what they set out to do. If you want to heat a rock, sit on it for 100 years, Japanese proverb. Doing it as well as possible. The value of perseverance is ubiquitous in the Japanese language and in many of the expressions used on a daily basis. One of the first words you learn when you study Japanese is ganbaremasu, which is normally translated as doing it as well as possible. The first two characters that make up the word are, which means stubborn or tenacious, and which means stretch or expand. Put together, the meaning would be something along the lines of stretch and expand my stubbornness objective as far as possible. The word ganbaremasu is at the heart of the expression ganbatte kudasai, which means do it as well as possible, but could be more literally translated as be stubborn and determined until you achieve what you aim to do. It is widely used in sporting circles for mutual encouragement, and also in the business world when new challenges are being faced. The ganbaremasu philosophy means not stopping until an objective has been reached. A 100-year plan. The new Japanese bullet train that will connect Tokyo with Nagoya, 286 kilometers, in less than 40 minutes will become operational in 2027. And not only is everything planned down to the last detail right up until 2027, but there are already plans to use the same magnetic levitation system to reach Osaka in 2045. Likewise, it has been calculated that by the year 2120s, this investment in technology will no longer carry a debt, but will begin to make a profit both for JR, Japan Railways, and for the Japanese government. A plan of more than 100 years. Before accelerating our personal bullet train, it is important to be clear what our final destination is and at which stations we will need to call. The Shinkansen effect driven by perseverance and ganbaremasu may be summarized by this formula. Patience without action leads to a passive life. Patience with perseverance leads to us fulfilling our goals. The man who practices. The Swedish psychologist Anders Ericsson, author, with Robert Poole, of the book Peak, Secrets from the New Science of Expertise, points out that Homo sapiens, the man who knows, should actually be called Homo exercens, the man who practices, since humans are the only species aware that it is possible to improve through practicing. However, not all types of practice lead to progress. Erickson divides them into two typologies. First, naive practice. This type that consists of simply dedicating time to something indiscriminately. Regardless of how many hours you devote to something, if you do it inefficiently or wrongly, you will not make the progress you hoped for. Second, deliberate practice. This type has a well-designed plan for reaching your goal. Erickson recommends 3 main guidelines for this kind of practice. 1. Define the targets. That way, you will know which steps to take and which direction to go in order to reach your goal. 2. Give it your full attention. This will allow you to adapt to different situations and problems without losing focus. 3. Ask for constant feedback to check that you're on the right track, and if not, make the necessary adjustments. Note: see details and implementation in Chapter 5. Feedback: how others see us, in which we examine techniques for asking for feedback effectively. The 10,000-hour rule. Inspired by Erickson's research, a decade ago, the British journalist Malcolm Gladwell wrote the book Outliers, in which he asked himself why only some people succeed, although genetics, family circumstances, and education undoubtedly have their part to play in the path to success. Gladwell points out that 10,000 hours of practice are necessary in order to succeed, and to illustrate this, he cites 2 cases of geniuses who met this dedication quota before blossoming. 1. Mozart. Although he began to compose at the age of 7, and some of his teenage pieces are remarkable, he wrote his great works after he was 21, by which time he had accumulated over 10,000 hours. Composing, practicing, and performing in public. 2. The Beatles. They too required these 10,000 hours to finally make it big. A good deal of this practicing was done in Hamburg, where they regularly performed from August 1960s to December 1962 in 4 different clubs, where they intensively perfected their skills. Upon their return to England, they were ready for success. We are what we do repeatedly. Aristotle. Now imagine something new you would like to learn. Before programming the time you're going to devote to it, let's take a look at Gladwell's summary of the different levels that can be reached, depending on how much time is devoted to practice. With 1 hour, we will have a basic introduction to the subject. B. With 10 hours, we will gain a wider notion of the main concepts. C. With 100 hours, we reach an intermediate level. D. With 1,000 hours, we become specialists. E. With 10,000 hours, we become masters of the subject. This last level represents excellence and, according to the neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, is the time the brain needs to master a field of human activity. However, an alternative study carried out at Princeton warns that intensive practice may not lead to success if we do not develop opportunity-recognizing prowess once we have achieved mastery. If, instead of seeking fame and fortune, the Beatles had carried on rehearsing in a basement upon returning to their hometown, we would probably never have heard of them. Fortunately, they used their 10,000 hours well. Plan your 10,000 hours. You have a passion that you are greatly attached to, an Ikigai you would like to devote your life to. You can consider attaining mastery through the 10,000-hour rule we discussed in this chapter. But this requires commitment and a plan. Perseverance, ganbarimasu, is essential, but you must decide how many years you can or want to allow yourself to achieve your great objective. The numbers don't lie. 8 hours a day. 5 days a week, 5 years, 4 hours a day. X 5 days a week, 10 years, 2 hours a day. X 5 days a week, 20 years, 1 hour a day. X 5 days a week, 40 years. Attaining mastery in a relatively short time demands total dedication. That is to say, our passion must be our job. However, even if we work in something else, a passion, the practicing of a particular art, sport, or object of study, can accompany us happily over a lifetime. The question is, what passion or Ikigai motivates me enough to devote my life to it? If you still don't have an answer to that, consider the words of the great psychiatrist and neurologist Viktor Frankl. If you don't know what your mission in life is, you already have one. To find it. Fourth station, new habits. 21 days to change your life. You're going to stop looking out of the window for a minute to turn the spotlight on our everyday life. Which habits govern your life? Which ones bring you closer to your goals and make you feel good? Which ones harm you and drain you of energy? It is said that humans are creatures of habit, and it is true that habits are essential for our survival, since they are mechanisms that help us to automatize tasks without constantly having to make decisions. If we had to think about every single move we make during the day, we would end up exhausted. The happiness that comes from repeating. In his novel The Unbearable Lightness of Being, Milan Kundera said, "Happiness is the desire to repeat, and that may apply to something as simple as our choice of what to wear each day." Mark Zuckerberg, the young founder of Facebook, has not changed anything about his attire since he made his first public presentation. He still wears the same gray shirt, the same dark gray sweater, and the same type of pants and shoes. As he says, "I want to simplify my life so that I have to make as few decisions as possible, other than those which serve my community." This is a very Zen way of simplifying things, which may be inspired by the iconic Steve Jobs, who for years wore the same things in all his public appearances: black turtleneck sweater, jeans, and white sneakers. When his biographer Walter Isaacson asked him about this adherence to a single outfit, Jobs explained that he had become friends with the prestigious designer Issey Miyake, who had already designed the uniforms for the workers at Sony. Among many other companies, although the Apple staff objected in no uncertain terms to Jobs' idea of supplying them with a factory uniform designed by Miyake, he finally decided to get a uniform for himself. This would be very practical for his daily routine and would also become his personal hallmark in his presentations. Without thinking twice, Steve Jobs asked the Japanese designer to make him 100 black sweaters in his size. When a surprised Miyake asked him why he wanted so many, Apple's CEO replied, "This is what I wear. This way, I'll have enough for the rest of my life." Although in a less radical way, another American who joined the club of those who are happy to repeat was Barack Obama, who dresses almost exclusively in gray or blue suits. When asked about this lack of imagination, he replied, "I don't want to make decisions about what I eat or how I dress every day because I already have too many decisions to make." Everyday viruses repeating habits that help make life easier brings us serenity and happiness. However, there are also bad habits that make themselves at home inside us, as if they were viruses. And unless we consciously deprogram them, it can be almost impossible to get rid of them. When bad habits take control of our everyday life, they can send it off the rails. On the other hand, if we replace them with good habits, the train heading for our dreams will pick up speed, and we will also free up mental space, which will allow us to be more creative. If we have a mental plan of what we are going to do, progress is assured. For example, the novelist Haruki Murakami wakes up every day at 4 in the morning and sits down to write for 5 or 6 hours. When he finishes, at around 9 or 10, he goes out for a run or goes swimming. He devotes the rest of the day to walking, reading, and listening to music as the mood takes him. The 21-day rule. Charles Duhigg, a New York Times journalist, became interested in habits when he realized that each day at 3 in the afternoon, he needed to eat a large chocolate cookie. Despite the fact he had eaten a good lunch and had problems with obesity. In theory, he wasn't hungry. Where was that irresistible impulse coming from? In the author's words, habits are the subconscious options and invisible decisions that surround us on a daily basis. In researching the question as to what was driving him and how to alter his behavior, he gathered many successful cases and verified that you need to keep at a new positive routine for 21 days in order to cement it. And he knew. Habit begins as a choice, and at the end of this period of repetition, the new habit becomes an automatic pattern. The first step towards being able to reprogram our mind is to identify the routine that makes you do the thing that is not in your best interests. In his own case, Duhigg observed how he was overcome by tiredness every day at 3 in the afternoon, which he redressed by going down to the cafeteria and buying the chocolate cookie. The second step is to experiment with new rewards in order to instill the new habit. What the NYT journalist really needed was to take a break. And the cookie represented the solution he had unconsciously incorporated into his everyday life. Once he was mindful of that, he replaced the reward with a healthier one, leaving his office and stopping by a colleague's desk for a 10-minute chat. He thus managed to have his break without adding to his weight problem, to establish the new habit over the 21 days so that it would become a part of his routine. Duhigg would set an alarm for the time the subconscious impulse came upon him. That was the signal for the journalist to leave whatever he was doing and pop out to chat for 10 minutes with a workmate. If no one was available, he would go out for a walk. According to several studies, up to 40% of the decisions we make throughout the day are routines that our brain recreates repeatedly, and in some cases has been doing for years. They are not meditated acts. If we identify the ones that harm us, replace them with positive ones, and make an effort to instill the new habit for 21 days, our life will take an almost miraculously qualitative leap forward. How to introduce a new habit. We have based this exercise on Charles Duhigg's techniques. It is aimed at cleaning out our bad habits and quickening our pace as we move towards our goals. For a deeper exploration of habits and how we can train ourselves to form healthy ones, we recommend reading Duhigg's The Power of Habit: Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. Let's go to the practical application. Step 1. Identifying how and when the habit appears. What is the bad habit? At what time does it happen? In which place? Which people are around? What emotions do you feel at that point? Step 2. Identifying the reward. What is your reward for carrying out your bad habit? Which healthful habit can you replace it with to get a similar reward? For example, if we have the bad habit of eating candy in the middle of the afternoon, we can try replacing it with a fresh carrot or some nuts. If we still don't feel satisfied, we can try going for a walk. Maybe the impulse to eat candy stems from feeling bored or anxious. The only way to know for sure is by testing different substitutes until we hit on one that both makes us feel satisfied and does us no harm. Step 3. Establishing the routine. It is very hard to suddenly change a routine, which is why it is important to identify a reward in Step 2 that is motivating enough for us to make the change happen. Once we have established how and when the habit appears in Step 1 and the reward that will replace it in Step 2, we can move on to establishing the new routine that will help us get rid of the bad habit. when I feel like what I will do is because it will give me. For example, when I feel like eating cookies at 5 in the afternoon and I feel lonely and bored at home, what I will do is go out for a walk to clear my head because it will give me the reward of energizing myself and the pleasure of anticipating sitting down later with a good book and a cup of tea. Fifth station, feedback. How others see us. Having continuous feedback is one of the fundamental principles of my engineering, whether it be for train improvements or for a moon mission. Feedback is the mirror that others show us to reflect our progress. The scientific method is in fact based on trial and error. Different solutions are tried out. Like Edison when he was looking for the filament for his light bulb, and each failure leads to a new alternative until you finally see the light. This is also applicable to the design of life itself. We can review each area of our life, relationships, career path, finances, cultural circle, etc., and rate them individually from 1 to 10. Depending on how satisfied we are, the ones that rank low will require us to improve and adjust them, most likely through changing our habits, as we saw in the previous chapter. Ask for negative feedback. When they asked Elon Musk, whose drive to innovate was discussed earlier in this book, about the secret of his success, he replied, "Pay attention to other people's opinions, especially the negative feedback from your family and friends." Getting or giving feedback is not always easy, since feelings can deceive us. Are you capable of telling a friend, to their face, what they are doing wrong? Are you capable of accepting negative criticism about a job you have devoted months of work to? Never give unsolicited advice. Often, when we see something in another person's life that's not working, we feel tempted to give our opinion, even though we haven't been asked for it. In most cases, all our initiative does is cause the other person stress, since if they had wanted our advice, they would have asked for it. What's more, this unsolicited feedback may be perceived as criticism, putting the other person on the defensive and possibly generating resentment. As far back as a century ago, Dale Carnegie was pointing out that criticism is very rarely welcome, since it attacks a person's self-esteem. He claimed that much more is achieved through a positive stimulus, pointing out what they do well. In those cases where criticism is necessary, because we have a sense of responsibility towards the other person, an employee, student, or child, it is important that before we voice it, we prepare the way with praise that makes the recipient feel loved and valued. Various studies have calculated that in personal and professional relationships, the praise to criticism ratio is 5 to 1. When we receive negative feedback, we react instinctively by running away from it. We have trouble accepting it. Few people take the time to analyze what others tell them. Of course, there is malicious criticism, which is the product of envy, but when several people point out the same problem or behavior, it is worthwhile to step back, look at things objectively, and take steps to make the needed changes. If we want to take a qualitative leap forward in what we are doing, asking for negative feedback directly may be a big help. This means asking the right people. Those we know will be sincere and will not feel obliged to praise us. The key to getting useful feedback is to ask specific questions. If you ask, "What do you think of my latest photo exhibition?" you will almost certainly get generic answers along the lines of, "I love your photos," or "beautiful." You will learn nothing from this kind of reply. But if you ask a specific question, "Which of the exhibit's 20 photos do you find the most bland and soulless?" you will get more precise answers and will know what to improve for the next time, especially if you ask why and listen to the answer carefully. If you get the feeling they can help you with their feedback, probe for details. Why do you think it's bland? Getting good feedback allows us to make much faster progress developing our passion, our Ikigai. In the absence of feedback, we run the risk of ending up lost in a sea of possibilities with our compass changing course every morning. Here is a golden rule of ethics. Think for a moment whether you prefer to receive undeserved praise or receive no praise at all, even though you deserve it. Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Here are a few keys to getting the kind of feedback that will help you improve your life and get closer to your goals. Ask for it from people you admire and who know more about the subject than you do. Ignore criticism from people you don't know and who know less about the subject than you do. Make the other person feel honored to give you feedback. Give credence to those who help you. In order to get specific feedback on a job or project, you can ask these 3 questions. A. Can you tell me what you like the least? I won't be offended. B. What do you like the most? C. And why do you like it? If they don't tell you exactly why, then forget it because it is not useful feedback. The SKS approach. Stop, keep doing. Start according to Professor Phil Daniels of Brigham Young University. The 3 following questions are excellent ways of asking others for feedback. The objective of these questions invite a fearless, honest response. The first one is very subtle because you are asking indirectly rather than directly what it is you are doing wrong. 1. What should I stop doing? 2. What should I keep doing? 3. What should I start doing? The information you will get from these 3 questions will help you to speed up the pace of improvement in all areas of your life: work, personal relationships, hobbies, arts, business, etc. The shortest route to self-progress is to pay attention to negative feedback. 6th station, senpai. Put a mentor or 2 in your life. We move forward on our journey, we will connect concepts we have learned from previous stations. In this chapter, we will combine the 10,000 hour rule with the gathering of feedback we discussed in the last chapter. Even if we sit down at the piano every day, the bullet train of our talent will never reach high speed if we only ever play our favorite song, the one we already know we have no trouble playing. To get the most out of practicing any discipline, we need to explore territories outside of our comfort zone. If we always ski on the easiest slopes, we will never become Olympic skiers. To overcome the fears and difficulties that come from stepping outside of our comfort zone, part of what Erickson calls deliberate practice, first-rate continuous feedback, will be a big help to us. Put simply, we need a teacher, mentor, coach who will offer us supervision and advice to help us cross the river. The senpai-kohai relationship. When a new graduate starts to work at a company in Japan, they are always assigned a senpai to guide them. The senpai is not a boss, but rather what we might translate as a mentor. Their mission is to transmit to the new employee, kohai, all their knowledge and skills about the job they have been doing for years. The senpai-kohai relationship is fundamental for the transmission of knowledge and is a key element in the development of Japanese technology and industry. Can you imagine being the kohai of an engineer who has been designing engines for Toyota for 30 years? We are sure you would learn more about engines by working alongside him for a year than by earning all the bachelor and master's degrees under the sun. The Everyday Senpai University. When I started working in Japan, I was surprised by how ill-prepared the new employees were when they joined companies, compared to the engineers from foreign universities. Some of the new arrivals didn't even know what HTML, the basic language of web pages, was. However, over time, I realized that although they might start almost from scratch, their capacity to listen and follow the path marked out for them by their senpai allowed them to become first-rate specialists over the years, exceeding anything I could have imagined. Who is your mentor? When we read about people who became well known for their genius, we sometimes get the feeling they were born with the talent, and suddenly, as if by magic, became the best. But behind every genius, there was almost always a master or mentor who guided them. Mozart's father guided his son from a very early age, and by the time he was 10, the child had already surpassed the 10,000 hours of deliberate practice under his supervision. Albert Einstein's first mentor was Max Talmy, an ophthalmologist who ate at the Einstein's home once a week and started to gift him science books when he was still a child. Geniuses are not born, they are made. You can be the next genius at any age, if you know how to choose a mentor who is capable of helping you ignite your spark and unleash your full potential. Satori piano. When I started developing my art therapy, I was looking for levers to make a person's creativity suddenly emerge, like uncorking a bottle of champagne. I had already seen for myself the power of fast writing with students who said they were suffering from writer's block, but who were capable of generating high-quality texts in the immediacy of the workshop. And something similar happens with visual arts when you allow yourself to be spontaneous. The best creations emerge when you stop the constant analysis and self-criticism. Achieving the same thing with the piano, an instrument that seems off-limits to people who have never come into contact with it, seemed like a pipe dream. To push past this preconception, I came up with the idea of the Satori piano, abrupt illumination in Zen, taking Professor Antonio Orchuo's simplified method as the starting point. The challenge was for any person to be able to play a short piano piece with both hands as early as the first session, which lasted less than 1 hour, and to play a simple version of Pachelbel's canon by the 4th or 5th session. To achieve that, I encouraged them to play on the keyboard without sheet music, setting them small challenges that would give way to bigger ones without their realizing it. To my amazement, almost all the Satori piano students managed to play two-handed from the start, and in the space of a month were already playing the songs they liked. However, the aim of this experiment was never to discover great pianists, although some of them demonstrated the aptitude to be so. The great benefit of this drill is to be found on a psychological level. As soon as a person shows they are capable of doing something that seemed impossible to them an hour earlier, a powerful change starts to be triggered on all levels. All the impossibilities are called into question, and the person launches themselves naturally towards the next challenge in any area of their life. On a subconscious level, the message we are sending ourselves would be, for example, if you are playing the piano two-handed, which is something you had never dreamed of being able to do, why shouldn't you be able to achieve other things in life? Like giving up smoking. Francesc. A good mentor will enable you to take the maximum advantage of every hour of practice by keeping you permanently challenged and highly concentrated. Even when it comes to matters of a personal nature, choosing a good senpai will help us take an exponential leap in our life, thus achieving the Shinkansen effect. The right choice will help us be more in tune with our Ikigai and always show us when we are straying from it. They can be an expert in the subject, a therapist, a coach, or consultant. A friend who shares your passion may be a big help too, and you can also guide each other. Self-coaching techniques. While you are looking for the suitable mentor, there are creative ways to get feedback about what you are doing. You can use electronic devices to measure your progress in any type of sport, allowing you to see that you are improving. YouTube is ideal for seeing people doing the same thing as you, better. If you admire someone in your discipline, read any interviews they have given and take notes. Absorb everything this person has produced and take it as your starting point. Log on to specialized internet forums. Tell people what you are doing and ask questions. You'll be able to quickly tell whose posts are most helpful. Try engaging these participants and ask them how you can make progress. If, for example, you want to improve your skills as a translator, practice by translating your favorite novel. Compare the result with the book translator's text. Analyze it sentence by sentence. Why did the translator choose such and such a word while you chose another? Read books by people who have achieved the same goals you are pursuing and read their biographies too. Template for a deliberate practice session. Planning the objective, looking and observing, plan the session objective. If it is something completely new, start by analyzing experts who have already done it and pay attention to their methods. Would you choose theirs over yours? Why? 2. Practice session during the exercise. Focus exclusively on what you are doing. To avoid losing concentration, perhaps try the Pomodoro technique we explain in Chapter 12. If it is a mechanical activity requiring you to improve your body movements, record yourself on camera. 3. Self-feedback. Once the exercise is over, it's time to draw conclusions. How was today's session? How did you feel? Happy, bored, distracted? From 0, easy, to 5, difficult. How would you score the session? Too easy? Find something more difficult for next time. 4. Detect the errors so you can correct them. What did I get wrong repeatedly? Where did most doubts appear? What do I need to improve? If you didn't get anything wrong, what you're doing is not ambitious enough and, as a result, you will not progress. 5. Write down the doubts that surfaced during the session. Decide beforehand who you are going to put your questions to. It may either be on an internet forum, on social networks, in the consulting room of a professional, or with a friend who works in the area that interests you. Make a note of the questions and of the answers as you get them. 6. Points to improve in the following sessions. 7th station, emulating, discovering, imitating, and outdoing. The start of the book, we talked about the miracle behind the creation of the Ikigai, a Japanese bullet train. That miracle stands on the shoulders of the inventor of the first working locomotive. His name was Richard Trevithick. It was in 1802 when this British engineer built the marvelous machine in a steelworks in Wales. He sold his patent a year later to Samuel Humphrey, the owner of the aforementioned steelworks, who, on seeing what the machine was capable of, made a bet with another industrialist that the locomotive would tow 10 tons of iron along 15.7 kilometers of track up to the village of Abercynon. On February 21, 1804, in the midst of great expectation, 5 boxcars loaded with iron, with 70 men aboard, were towed to their destination at a speed of a little under 4 kilometers an hour. Unloaded, the machine was capable of reaching 25 kilometers an hour. To carry out this feat, the train required 4 hours and 5 minutes. Everything has a beginning, and our capacity to improve what already exists is practically unlimited. And that applies equally to any personal project, however small or insignificant it may seem to us. Copying to improve. Benjamin Franklin, who stars in a chapter of this book, practiced a strange intellectual exercise. He would read journal articles and, a few days later, would try to write what he had read, as far as he could remember. Then he compared it to the original text. This method is nothing unusual. Great painters began by copying those they admired and comparing the final result to the original. 10 Things Nobody Told You About Being Creative. Austin Kleon's book, Steal Like an Artist, brings together 10 unexpected keys to carrying out any project. And the first one is precisely on the subject of taking a model, which you will imitate and outdo. 1. Steal like an artist. It is not a matter of plagiarizing, but of taking remarkable examples, whether they be works or people, as a starting point for our own projects. Don't wait to find out who you are before setting things in motion. Get started now, with whatever you have, and you will gradually discover your identity, talent, and Ikigai along the way. 3. Write the book you would like to read. What has not been done yet, and that you feel is lacking, may be your life mission. 4. Use your hands. We have to distance ourselves from screens to get back to using our best. Computers have robbed us of the feeling that we really do things. Says Cleon, you have to involve your whole body, not just your brain. 5. Extra projects and hobbies are important. Pastimes make us happy and can also turn into projects that transform our lives and those of others. 6. The secret: do a good job and share it. Passing on your creations, and even your thoughts to others, will enable you to get feedback and good ideas. 7. We are no longer constrained by geography. According to Cleon, traveling makes the world seem new to us and our brain work harder. 8. Be kind. The world is a little village. Instead of arguing, channel your energy into a creative purpose. 9. Be bored. It is the only way to work. After the creative high, routine and persistence, as we have seen, are important to carry out and complete the great idea you have come up with. 10. Creativity also means lightening the load. To combat the excess of information you have, to focus on what is key to your project and leave everything else out. In Japan, copying does not have the negative connotation it has in the West, as long as what you are imitating is adapted or improved. In fact, the ukiyo-e prints, such as Hokusai's famous illustration The Great Wave of Kanagawa with Mount Fuji in the background, are copies of an original pattern. The pattern is of no value. It is the reproductions that are valuable. Many Japanese words that mean copying are closer to the concept of reflection, and the reflection of something can occasionally be even more beautiful than the original. The value of the ephemeral. In Western schools, we are taught that the older something is, the more valuable it is. If a church has been standing for 400 years, it appears in guidebooks, while one that was destroyed in the war and rebuilt 50 years ago will almost certainly go unnoticed. In Japan, the important thing is the intrinsic beauty of something, and the fact it is a copy or reconstruction of the original is of little import. The whole Japanese education system is based on the repetition of katas, which seek to copy a particular pattern. The Aya's Grand Shrine, regarded as the most important Shintoist shrine in the world, is knocked down every 20 years and rebuilt exactly the same. This is a tradition that has been carried out since the year 69 O's. We can thus calculate that the Aya's temple has been rebuilt over 60 times, with the same architectural design always being copied. According to Shintoist thinking, this tradition helps maintain the site's freshness and purity. The rebuilding tradition of the Aya's Grand Shrine is not looked favorably upon either by guidebooks or by the committee that decides what should constitute a World Heritage Site. But it is vital to understand the value of that which is ephemeral. Creating something new through symbiosis before the 4th century, Japanese was a non-written language. Instead of creating their own system, the Japanese copied the Chinese writing system based on Hanzi characters. Obviously, the Hanzi were not a perfect fit for their language, so they had to change them for what are known today as kanji characters. 2 new alphabets even had to be created: hiragana and katakana. Thus did the Japanese create their language. They took something that already existed and adapted it to their needs. The same thing occurred with the bullet train that astonished the world during the Tokyo Olympics. Manga is another curious and noteworthy case. Osamu Tezuka is considered the father of manga, and based his style on Disney cartoons, American comics, and traditional Japanese drawings. He not only created a new type of comic from these three ingredients, but also something else. He created a new genre called manga. As an art form, manga could be placed at the epicenter of a triangle formed by comics, animation, and novels. Once more, Tezuka allowed himself to be inspired and adapted what he had seen abroad to his own country's art and way of thinking. Improving the present. The Japanese are well known for being fast at copying and making improvements. So, if they see a new business opportunity that comes from the United States, they swiftly copy it. When Starbucks began to set up their first outlets in Japan, they realized there were already tens of cafeteria chains there with a similar business model to theirs. They had been copied, and when 11 started to invade Japan with 24-hour shops, the Japanese not only copied the distribution model, but bought 11, which is now a Japanese company. Once it was in their hands, they improved the company and conquered America with more shops and Japanese products. Recently, Spanish companies began to successfully export ham, and many restaurants offered menus including Serrano ham. Little by little, Iberico Buda, Iberian pig, began to be incorporated into traditional Japanese recipes. Inevitably, Iberico Buda produced in Japan has already appeared on the scene. It can be bought in any supermarket and is cheaper than Spanish ham. If we look at the label, we will see that it does in fact come from Hokkaido pigs fed on Bariota. They have also imported the Spanish word bolota, which means acorn. If what happened with whiskey happens with ham, Spanish companies have a reason to be worried. A few years ago, after copying and improving the best Scottish distilleries' processes, the Yamazaki single malt sherry cask was voted the world's best whiskey by British tasters. A springboard for bettering yourself, choose a work that you especially admire, which is related to your skills, like writing, music, drawing, or, why not, even cooking. Let us imagine, for example, that the work is a novel, and that writing comes quite easy to you. In that case, you would follow these steps. 1. Examine the last novel that really made an impression on you. About which strong points make it so appealing, for example, really surprising dialogues, the beauty of its descriptions, the twists and turns of the plot. Detect its weak points. Even masterpieces have aspects which to our mind could be improved. For example, parts of the novel which are too slow, transitional chapters, or an ending that seems to tail off. Take note and write them down. 3. Import improvements from other works. In an exercise of symbiosis, look for works that do not have these weak points and add their good points to the list of characteristics the ideal novel would have. 4. Start a work with all of these qualities. Once you have listed the positive characteristics all the novels have between them, use them as a guide for your own project. Maybe you won't manage to create a great work on your first attempt, but you will have good guidelines to work with, and perhaps one day you will improve on the original, or even better. Create something completely new from this symbiosis, which will inspire others. Many of the artists who started out by copying have ended up being copied. 8th station. Your element.